What is up, friends and neighbors? My name is Matt Savage. I'm the host of Mission Control, Houston's hockey podcast. And stay with me for a bit. I'm going to get a little political, but remember what I said last episode. Sports should be non-political. I just want to make a point that is relevant to the NHL. Now, I can't see your social media feeds or what you look at, regardless of what social media you're on, but I'm willing to make a evidence-based prediction, which is that there are entirely too many political posts that you're seeing on your social media feeds. And I'm going to go a step further without knowing your politics and guess that half of those political posts are stupid and you wish you didn't see them. Now, I say this without knowing your politics, without telling you mine. Remember what I said last episode, sports should be apolitical. And I believe that. I don't care what your opinion is on Pride Night. I don't care what your opinion is on people saying their team names or shouting them during the national anthem. I don't care your opinion on military appreciation night or whatever. That's your business. We can all keep it to ourselves and still get along. The only time I care about pride support in the NHL is the rainbow tape. It's like, well, the goalie can track the puck easier with the... But other than that, your own politics are your own business. But I do want to comment on this that you probably saw when Bettman was on the air talking to Bissonnette, talking about the state income taxes, and we have people whining about, well, some states don't have a state income tax, and because of that, the players get to keep more of their money, and therefore those teams can recruit better players, where Bettman says this up here, it's a ridiculous issue. When the Florida teams weren't good, nobody said anything. And he's right, it's a ridiculous issue, but not for the reasons that he and some others are thinking. How good or bad Florida is, or Dallas is, or other teams without a state income tax is really not the issue. The issue is that sports is a microcosm of life. And the income tax issue for sports teams is like the state income tax issue anywhere. Now, some of the things that I've mentioned in previous episodes, by trade, I'm a historian. I teach history. You probably noticed on the last episode, I put the history library up in the bookshelf, because one of the other things I do while I'm on camera is during the summer, I'm teaching some history classes, right? And so, I figure I should look scholarly, and with a little nod to the hockey obsession here too. So indulge me for a moment while I put on the social studies hat for a moment and talk about this state income issue as it relates to the NHL. And that's this. During the founding of the country, before the founding of the country, when European settlement was coming into the New World, you've heard the stories since elementary school that colonists come over to the New World for religious freedom. If you want to be Catholic and practice Catholicism and get away from the Church of England, you're going to Maryland. If you want, Quakerism, you're going to Philadelphia, or you're going to Pennsylvania. Okay. Now, why am I mentioning that? Well, because this is ancient knowledge. You go to a place that meets your values, and you don't expect other places to adapt to meet your wants. And in recent decades, that seems to be the mindset of people that, well, the community should adapt to me, not I should adapt or go to a community that reflects my ideas. So what does that have to do with hockey? If you think Florida and Dallas and other no state income tax teams have an advantage over your state income tax team or province income tax team, I don't know, maybe vote differently. Maybe choose not to live in a nanny state or choose not to live in a dystopian hellhole. That's it. Meanwhile, when Houston enters the league and it's happening, you don't like it. Some of you don't like it. I would assume Houston hockey viewers like it just fine. But Canadians certainly don't like it. More on them here in a second. But when Houston enters the league, we're going to be yet another team that has the imaginary advantage of not having a state income tax. Now, does that mean that Houston moves to the front of the line in terms of being a viable Stanley Cup candidate? Maybe, but it'll have less to do with income tax and more to do with whatever astronomical price that the league is going to demand for a franchise to come in. You know, Vegas just zoomed up there with a favorable expansion draft, and they were able to do it because they were overcharged for the franchise. We already know that the next two teams coming in are going to be overcharged for their franchise, and there's no way an owner is going to go, I'm not paying $1.5 billion, $2 billion, whatever it is, for a team that's not competitive. I want to be competitive now. And there's no way that the NHL is going to stand there and go, no, that's against the integrity of the game when there's $2 billion on the table. So, now that having been said, I am greatly going to appreciate and dance to the wailing and gnashing of teeth that will come from the Sabres fans, the Blue Jackets fans, the Minnesota fans, the Sharks fans, the Mammoth fans. There's no such thing as Mammoth fans, but Vancouver, Ottawa, Winnipeg, all those areas that have some kind of income tax, either in their state or province, and have yet to lift a Stanley Cup. I will enjoy the music of their crying. Hey kids, let's put some dates on your calendar, right? So open up that Google Calendar or whatever it is that you use, and let's mark some UH hockey down, because the University of Houston has the highest level of hockey in the city for now. So with that in mind, let's remember there is a home and away with Texas A&M University. Even though the away game, A&M has decided to do it at the Aerodrome, it lessens their travel, but ultimately it's good for us. Remember, I have given you guys a warning about Texas A&M sports, so keep that in mind. But come on out, cheer on the Cougars either way. We'll have another homestand in October against East Texas Baptist, October 24th and 25th. And then we have a homestand in February against UTSA. And that's not a lot. I'm hoping they're going to add more. But we have that. And then another thing for UH Hockey Club, I want you guys to put on your schedule is a fundraiser for the UH Hockey Club at Raising Cane's. Raising Cane's is going to give them 15% of net sales. So I don't know if you need an excuse to go out to Raising Cane's or whatever, but if you find yourself in the Sugar Land area, let's support the boys, right? Okay. So in last 2 weeks episode, I mentioned I was going to KC for work. KC is on our list of top prospects for NHL expansion. Now, the list has been updated. Let me put that list on the screen now. And I really don't want to get into the weeds of going through the whole thing. We had a long episode. If you're interested in the formula of how we come about it, here's the quick version of how that happened. It's mostly corporate presence, metro population, demographic trend, median income, that sort of thing that pro sports tends to look at. But anyway, take a look at that if you want to. If you want to get into the nitty gritty commentary of all this, there is an episode called Does Houston Deserve the 33rd Expansion Franchise that gets into the weeds of why Houston's on top of that. And I added some other cities too. Now, whenever Houston or Atlanta gets talked about for potential NHL expansion, there's always someone in some comment that says that we don't deserve it. Okay, fine. Because Canada does. But we added some new Canadian cities and did the math. And it's like, no, these aren't viable NHL cities. And I think what's happening is Canadian fans are looking at this going, well, Canadians are bigger hockey fans. And that's true. And I think they're conflating sports and professional sports. At the highest level of professional sports, it's more of a business than it is a passion project. And Houston's on top for the next viable business, hockey business. But I feel like when the math is done and Houston comes out on top, that I'm biased. And I don't disagree with Canada's passion. So I did some thinking and I said, all right, well, what does that list look like if we had a second team in Toronto? And by far, number one, everything the league is looking for to expand. All right. Well, what about the other 6 NHL Canadian cities? It's 1 through 7. But, the Leafs are going to block another team in Toronto. The Canadians are going to block another team in Montreal, etc., etc. So when you take away the cities that don't already have an NHL team, Canadian teams are not in the top 4. Sorry, guys. It's Houston, Atlanta, Phoenix, and San Diego. And we'll see. Because I have a pet theory that Bettman's going to add another Canadian franchise before he goes. But I have nothing to base that on, and the numbers don't bear it out. It's just a gut feeling. So, at any rate, like I said, I was at Kansas City, and my plan was to record some stuff from a hockey bar and record some stuff outside T-Mobile Center whilst talking about my thoughts on KC, just because they're on the list of potential expansion franchises. And as I'm doing the video, I realized this sounds more insulting than I mean it to. I don't want to go into details on the hockey bar. Just like, we got the Maple Leaf. It's better. T-Mobile Center isn't full. It's got a couple of events, but the biggest recurring source of revenue there is professional bull riding, and the ECHL team that plays in Kansas City plays in a suburb of Kansas City and not in T-Mobile Center. So that area is just standing vacant. I've mentioned all this before. So I kind of don't want to go into the place I just was and their viability as an expansion franchise. Because I like the town. I had World War I museums there. And that's a fun time just as a history nerd. But anyway, I wanted to share with you the revelation that those 7 Canadian teams the league would rather have 7 more Canadian teams in those 7 Canadian cities than ever coming to Houston. But the teams are going to block it. So if they're going to expand, it's going to be Houston, Atlanta. There you go. But hey, since we're talking about my trip to KC, or minimally talking about my trip to KC, let me share with you a lesson I learned. Which is, you can't generate interest where none exists. I say this because every now and then When we talk about Houston having hockey, some redneck bubble will be like, oh, that's never going to play here. Houston's never going to care. We care about football and that's it. And I understand there is a significant part of the population that thinks that way. And what if he's right? Because I noticed something during my trip. Kansas City has the largest stadium dedicated to female sports. Their soccer club is the KC Current, or their women's soccer club is the KC Current. And man, there was just a media blitz the entire time I was there for promoting the women's soccer club. All the streetcars, or most of the streetcars, had interior and exterior of the streetcars had stuff promoting the club. The ladies on the team had their pictures all over the outsides of things. There was countdown to season kickoffs. There were storefronts with activities for kids that promoted the team. There was stuff sold in stores right next to the Chiefs and the Royals, and even I saw stuff for the Kansas City Monarchs, the team from the Negro Leagues. Nothing for the KC Scouts, not that you would expect there to be. But my point is this. There was such marketing thrown at the Current. And the entire time I was there, not just in the touristy areas downtown, but also, well, I guess casinos are touristy too. But throughout the town, I didn't see a single person wearing KC Current merchandise. I saw a lot of Chiefs gear, I saw a lot of Royals gear. And before you think, well, yeah, but that's unfair because women's sports, I saw a couple of Indiana Fever jerseys and t-shirts for Caitlin Clark. I saw nothing for the women's soccer team. So my point in that observation is this. If Redneck Bubba is right, and there is no interest in hockey in Houston, which attendance numbers bear out that he's wrong, but if he's right, I'll concede the point. If, with an asterisk, if we have even mediocre ownership and no one shows up to the games and we wind up moving, I'm not going to sit there with my fist balled acting like it's a great injustice the way I do for the Arrows leaving in 2013 because the Rockets owner decided to have a hissy, right? So that's where you come in, boys and girls. Let's start generating interest. I mean, hell, we're in the middle of the Stanley Cup. If ever there was a time to bring your friends on, it's now. You know, you want a cheap game to go to? I'm about to give you the UH schedule. Let's bring people into the community. And with that, let me move on to the next thing. Hey, since we're talking about life with added teams in the NHL, let's talk about what that really means. So, one of the arguments against having too many teams in the league that I've heard, aside from talent dilution, which I think is a non-factor, is the more teams that are in a league, the less likely it is that your team will win the title. You know, there's old guys out there now, you know, I waited 67 years to watch the Lions win the Super Bowl, and I'm afraid it's not going to happen before I die, and it probably won't. And I think that's a non-factor. I don't think that has any bearing on whether or not a league should add more teams. But it does raise questions for the playoffs, and let's just talk the not so much what's likely, but what would you like? Because I think too many teams make the playoffs, and in most sports leagues nowadays, the top half of teams makes the playoffs, and a lot of people like that. a lot of people are like, no, I want there to be a chance for my team to win the title, however remote. I want there to be a chance. And let's remember, boys and girls, the first title that our city had with the Big Four sports teams, the Rockets, that first year entered the playoffs as a 6th seed and wind up winning the whole thing. So I see the value in that argument. And yet, man, I like that old school baseball way of doing playoffs, where if you don't win the division, you don't advance. We can talk about how valuable divisions are anyway. But I think there should be a mechanism in hockey and in everything else where, I don't know, maybe the top third, not so much the top half of teams. And I get that alienates a lot of teams. And I just think that there should be bigger rewards for doing well during the regular season. I think the regular season should matter more. I think for what we pay for regular season tickets, those games should have more bearing on the outcome of who wins the cup, and it's one of those things like, well, we had the President's Cup for the regular season. Yeah, and everyone hates it. When your team wins the President's Cup, you're like, oh God, no. Oh God, no. Winnipeg fans towards the end of the seasons were like, can we throw some games so we don't get the President's Cup because it's thought of as a curse, So I think less teams should make the playoffs. And that's not going to happen because there's money to be made and more teams making the playoffs. So, okay, fine. I can accept that. And since we're talking about things that will never, ever happen, I wish we had relegation in American sports. It's like, oh man, if the league's going to get to 36 teams or 40 or, 11 billion or whatever it is, then, we should send the horrible teams down to the AHL and lift up the good AHL teams. And can you imagine a scenario where the Albany River Rats are competing against the Edmonton Oilers for a Stanley Cup? That's never going to happen, but I wish it would. I wish we put more emphasis on play and talent. And, Canadians, I'm a little with you when you talk about who deserves a team more than others, because I would like for us to not live in a reality where corporate presence and median income for a city matters less than fan involvement and talent level on the ice. But it doesn't, and that's not where we live. So, I would love for there to be a relegation system and just add more teams and just go with it. But that's not the reality that we're in. Hey, can we talk about the playoff format for a moment? Because I know this is something that's been talked about. And I just looking at the brackets here, like that Dallas Colorado matchup. How cool would that have been as a conference final? I just gotta say, I don't care about the divisions. I don't care about divisional rivalries. And also, I think as we add more teams, I'm going to care even less about divisional rivalries. I mean, I can imagine some things are going to be shuffled around, right? I think, and I think you do too, but Bettman wants to create those artificial rivalries. I think it ought to be a 1 seed versus 8 seed, a 2 seed versus 7 seed, and so on and so forth. So we get the better series matchups as we get closer to the cup final. To me, that just makes sense. If an 8 seed is able to upset a 1 seed, that's a story. Let it happen. But at any rate, and I think you feel how I feel. Most fans do. I get that travel costs are a thing, but when we're talking about billion-dollar franchises, I think you want the best product and maybe not nickel and dime with these sort of things. Hey, I want to leave you with this. Um, I I think it's episode 8 or 9 for this show now, and I had some definitive ideas for the show that may have wound up not being practical, and I'm thinking about retooling. But I want to tell you the mindset and some things I've learned. I wanted a 30-minute show because I like listening to podcasts as I'm driving to work, and the average commute time is half an hour. Um, Come to find out, I like to do a lot of visual things, and YouTube tends to work more as a short video format. So I don't know. I'm thinking about just doing chunks of video and uploading those to YouTube, and then compiling them all as one Spotify episode or whatever platform you're on. It's something I'm thinking. It also sounds like a lot of trouble. I don't know if that's the direction I want to go. Um, I also didn't want to put myself out there. You know, it's Houston's hockey podcast, not Matt's hockey podcast. The YouTube gurus say, "Oh, put your picture in your thumbnail." And today was the first time I've done that with the small little framed portrait on the astronaut's wall as he's doing his taxes. Um, so, with all of that and the attempts to grow gradually, I'm not really worried about monetization or anything like that, but I do want to grow to the point where we can have live streams. Like, I think it will be great when the team gets announced if we can just celebrate together online, um, that sort of thing. So, anyway, with that, let me beg for your comments, your feedback, your likes, your sharing. I do notice it. It is appreciated. You know, I'm at 53 subscribers now, which in YouTube world is nothing, and yet every time that number ticks up, and if the wife's around, hey, I got another subscriber. I'm really happy when I get comments from you guys, even if it's oh, put another team in Houston already, damn it. There's nothing I can do about it, but I love that you share my passion. And the whole point here is to build a community. So this is just a long-winded way of me saying thank you. Thanks for sticking around to the end. And with that, boys and girls, let's go ahead and end the show here and remind ourselves, what did we learn today? Well, we learned that we probably don't have the big tax advantage that... we probably don't have the big tax advantage that 26 whining cities want to make us out to be, but we have one more thing to be mean to rival cities about. So that's always fun. And remember, we are in the middle of the Stanley Cup Finals, so teach your friends the games, teach them offsides, teach them icing, and with that, friends and neighbors,